the moment that happened, and even before that, we've been working to make this happen. And the vision is if, I mean, that this is the beginning. And hopefully, if people respond well to it, we can, maybe it won't be a day in a few years, maybe it will start to be something that Virginia Tech does that makes us unique.
One of the comments that I had noticed is nowadays we're kind of raised up in a society of specialists where we go on one track and we learn one thing for 10 to 15 years and get a PhD, but we only know that one thing. And I think this is kind of a step to become more of the Renaissance type person, such as the founding fathers of this nation, such as Thomas Jefferson, who was a businessman, who was a scientist, who was a politician, who was involved in economic theory. And so with that broad perspective of learning different fields, or at least having some familiarity with it, he was able to create and establish such a beautiful system that we have in the Constitution. So I think this is one of the steps towards that, getting this familiarity between a whole different things and becoming a modern residence mayor.
Let's see, hand. Oh, this last comment? Oh, I'll be back.
I just wanted to make a quick observation. I think Dean Knox mentioned that you were surprised that a lot of people chose a local question. I was struck when I read through the questions that the local question was the one that most resonated with me, because it was the one that I can most relate to, and I can most bring my experiences to bear on. And I'm just, I guess, throwing that out there. Was that anyone else's experience?
Well, one of you had the question, how do you decide the topic to choose? It was democratically done. But when I proposed AIDS epidemic in UA, and I jokingly said, as a veterinarian, we will solve the problem so easily. We test and slaughter. And as you can see, it scared them. I was really serious about that. Quickly, somebody recovered in our group and said, test and segregate. And then they realized that's what one of the countries neighbor to us did address. And the wacky problems do need wacky answers. Otherwise, we will deal with it in a long time. And I was voted down by 4-2.
I think a really great comment just about what you did with your group. I mean, we really wanted to encourage you to think outside of the box and not be constricted. We weren't maybe thinking about that far, but but really, we're glad to produce a space where, that's why we talked about don't worry about legislation, don't worry about money, because these things tend, in our interactions in forming this group, these things tend to restrict what we think is possible. So it's good to hear that, because that's the intention for creating the space, was that we could have ideas that normally would never come up, such as that one. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I really had a good time doing the activity that we had here, and I wonder if one of the things that I noticed as we tried to think through the different questions, it felt like we always had a gap in our interdisciplinary team. So there was somebody, if we just had a sociologist, if we just had this or that, and I wonder if maybe the next time you do the activity, if you provide people with the opportunity to generate their own idea. So you have folks share what they're currently working on, what their disciplines are, and then come up, is there a common theme? Is there anything in here that we could have found that could project this group of scientists forward into a project that could be something that potentially could be fundable over the longer term? And so I think that I really did enjoy the idea of having to respond to a specific question, but you might even get a little more creativity if you allowed the tables themselves to come up with what the issue was that you thought that they thought they could deal with?
Just to give you ideas, we're floating a lot of ideas for next year's IDR Day, and one of the things we might put a lot of our effort into next year is creating a situation in which the questions, or whatever kind of projects we're working on, we might actually be talking with people in the university months beforehand so that the winning ideas would actually be taken to someone who might actually be able to do something about it. So once again, we've only had a month to put this together. So we'll have a whole year, and that idea has already been brought up, that as opposed, this is kind of the test run. By next year, hopefully, we would have, we're trying to think big. So other comments on the process?
Hi, first I would like to thank you all for the organization. It has been a very delightful night for all of us, and I can speak for Table 14. We had a lot of fun, and if anyone told me that I would solve the obesity problem using electrical engineering, I would have thought they were just giving me a joke. So I'm glad I went into this discussion tonight, and I think what this event did is it broke the fear barrier among disciplinaries, and we really need such events like this just to have some time away from our labs and learn that there are others out there doing other stuff that could be of use to us, and we're not alone in this planet. Okay, but don't tell my supervisors. Anyway, thank you again, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
One of the great things about this organization, I think, is that we really can do things on the fly. So your comments are, we actually just decided, you have forms to comment on this in your little packets. So the suggestions section, we are going to read every single one of these, and we will incorporate that in what we're aiming for next year. So please take that seriously, because that we have 17 members right now. We of course hope that many of you will apply to become members in the fall when we have our next round of membership. But those forms, we are very open. That's why we put that there. So if you have some ideas, ways to make this better, things we could do, anything of that sort, please consider entering that into suggestions. Any other comments on this process? Thoughts, experiences?
Thank you again for this evening, and I would just like to say that I've done a lot of activities while I've been a graduate student here where I've interacted with students from all over campus, but there are so many faces here tonight that I've never seen out before. And that's just wonderful. I'm so glad that the graduate student community has found something that pulls you out and has created the new community that I haven't seen yet here. So I would just like to encourage all of you to not just make this tonight, but to continue to be engaged, because there's so many opportunities. With this Honor Society is just one example of the many opportunities we have as graduate students at Virginia Tech. So I was just so happy to meet the students here tonight, and I hope that you keep coming out and see your faces more and more.
We're going to go to awards in a second. Does anybody have one last comment on this process they'd like to share with everyone? Okay, we're going to do the awards now.